Hi everybody, and welcome back to Sew Along with Jan and the April Kimberbell Mini Quilt. So in this video, this is the fourth video, and we're going to go ahead and put this together. So I'm working on from the book on page 25. That's where the finishing the quilt information is. So we're just going to sew this together, and then we're going to put the backing on, and we're going to put the binding on. So we did some of the things that they had at the top of this page already. They talked about quilting the little sashing pieces that went on the top and the bottom of the You're a Good Egg block. So we already have that done. We did that in the first video. Okay, so there's one section of the little mini quilt, those three pieces. And then we have the upper row with the little window applique ones. Those three will go in the top row. And then we have the three blocks that are the ones that the appliques on top of the little window, and those will go on the bottom. So I've got all of those ready and in order here. And then I'm going to tell you some of the other things that you need to put this together. So you'll need your binding, and in the first page where the instructions for the cutting, one of the first pages here, let me grab it. Here it says for the binding to do 3 21-inch pieces. I happen to have some yardage, so I've only got 2 pieces here. It wasn't like a full width of fabric, so I have a couple of pieces, but there's plenty of binding here. I have made my binding by sewing it together on a diagonal. I will link the bind aid document if you have a little trouble getting your binding ready. And then I make 2 1/4 inch binding. This is 2 1/4 inch instead of 2 1/2 like they say in the instructions. So I just wanted to let you know that's my binding. And then we're also going to be putting a sleeve on this on the back of our little mini quilt, so we have something to hang it in our little stand with. And so what I did is I cut a piece of fabric 6 inches wide and 12 inches long. And then on the top, I marked in 1/2 inch on each side and put a mark there. And then as you can see, this looks like a diagonal now. I marked the 1/2 inch at this top, and then I lined my ruler up on the very edge of the bottom and then slightly angled it in. So the top is going to be 11 inches now and the bottom 12 inches. So I have that ready. And then you're going to take about a 1/2 inch on each side and then roll over another 1/2 inch. So you have about a 1-inch hem on each side. And I haven't sewn that in. I'll sew that in a little bit. But I wanted you to see the edges so that you could see what the little sleeve was going to look like. And then we'll fold it up like this when we go get ready to put it on the back of the quilt. And then we'll just sew it into the binding. And then to attach it to the bottom of the little sleeve to the quilt, I'm going to be using some Heat and Bond Ultra, which is that bonding agent, and it's the permanent bonding. So I'm going to use Heat and Bond Ultra hold on the bottom of the little sleeve to hold it to the back of the quilt once we're done putting the back on. And then of course you'll also need your back, and my back is 14 by 14. And I also like to put a piece of shape flex on the back. And the reason I do that is when you're doing stitching in the ditch in between the little blocks and stuff, the backing, if you don't have something on it to give it a little stabilization, to stabilize it a little bit, it likes to wrinkle real bad when you stitch through the ditch. So I did put some Heat and Bond, some Shape Flex SF101 on the back of my little backing, just to give it some body, and then it won't pucker so when I go to do the stitching in the ditch towards the end. So there's our backing. And then let me put my binding up here too. And let's start with let me get this over here so I won't lose it. And we're going to start with the top row. So the top row is going to be the last 3 blocks that we did. So it's the little bunny, the chick, oops, this one goes last. So the little chick, this little chick, and then the little chick with the blue. So these three are the first. So we're just going to sew these together to make the first row. Okay, so let me get my book out of here. and then we'll sew together the second section. So we'll do this in 3 sections and then sew it together. Now I'm just using some Pima cotton thread. I think I've just got white. I think that will be fine for this because these are all pretty light colors. And I'm going to flip this one. This is the second one. Yeah, this is the second one. So I'm just going to flip this together, and we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam. Put one pin in there. Just kind of hold it together for me. And I'm going to be using Q02, which is the 1/4 inch piecing stitch on my luminaire. And of course you can use your piecing foot if you rather. I like to use Q02, so I can just leave my J foot on because then I'll be zigzagging before too long. So let's see if I'm missing anything else in the instructions. Just says to press as you go. Yep, just 1/4 inch piecing, 1/4 inch piecing. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get these two put together. And I like to tie off on these because they kind of like to come unsewn a little bit because they're a little stiff, a little thicker. Okay, I'll do this one. So I'm just using the tie off button, which is the little polka dot button on my machine that just ties it off in place instead of going backwards. You could use a reverse tack stitch if you want. Okay, so there's our first 2 little blocks, and then this one goes on the end. So we'll turn this one over, get these lined up, and these are all starting out as 4.5, and they're going to end up as 4 when they're all put together. This is always my favorite part, is putting it together because it's almost done. It'll be so cute. Anxious to see it in the frame. So this one's been a fun one. It was a little different with all that. There was a lot of instructions and stuff on this one, and so it was a little different than some of the other ones have been. Get a hold of that pin. Get everything lined up down here. Okay, we'll tie it off. Okay, so there's our first row. So there's our first row. Now I'm going to press these in a moment, but I thought we'd just do the 3 rows and then I'll go do all the pressing at once. So there's our first row. The second section is going to be the 2 sashing strips and the You're a Good egg block. So we're going to put one of these sashing strips on the top of each top and the bottom. So I think I'll put a couple of pins in this one because it's kind of long. And then we'll do both of these. This one's going to turn out so cute. Okay, so we'll put this one on too so we can do them both at the same time. So one on the top, one on the bottom. And with any luck at all, I got I was going to look and see if there made any difference where I don't know that it makes any difference which way the little diamonds go. Can't really see them in the picture, so I don't know that it really makes any difference. So if you want them to like go opposite ways or something, so like the diamonds are heading this way on this one, and they could head this way, or if you want them all going the same direction, maybe we'll do it that way. I don't think it really matters, whichever you like. I think it doesn't matter. They look nice either way. All right, so let's get this one pinned on, and then we'll stitch these. Hopefully my video is going, oh, yep, my video is going okay. All right, we're going to do the same thing. I'm using Q02 for the 1/4 inch piecing. I'm going to tie a knot at the end here, and we'll stitch these on with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Get these on here. All right. Get it tied off at the end. Turn it over and do the other side. These actually go together pretty quick. Even though you have to do like, you know, like the stitching in the ditch and the binding, they go together pretty quickly. Once you get all the little blocks done. This one had 7 blocks and 2 sashings, so like 9 blocks. And the first one had 9 blocks, I think, too. So, you know, when you have that many blocks, it takes a little bit. And I am doing a full 1/4 inch on these. Tie this one up. Okay. My pin's out of the way here. And then I'm going to press these open. So those look nice. So there's the center section. You're a good egg. And I ended up making my little diamonds go in the same direction, but you could do them opposite directions too. It doesn't matter. Okay, so there's the second section, and then the third section is going to be the bottom row here. And so the little bunny is going to go first, then the chick, and then the other bunny. So this is how these go in. So we'll do these 2 first. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. Let's see here. Put a pin in there. And again, I'm using a white Pima cotton thread in my needle and my bobbin for this. I thought white would be fairly neutral. You could do a gray, a light gray too, whichever works for you. There's a lot of colors in this, so, but they're all pretty light colored. All right, so we're going to tie off at the other end here. And cut, and then we're going to put our little bunny on the end. Like this. Okay. Put a pin in that one. And then I'll go press all of these rows. And you do want to press the seams open because otherwise they don't lay very flat. So they're kind of thick, so you're going to want to press them open. And then we'll put the rows together. All right, so let's get this 1/4 inch seam in this one. Tie off on the other end here. All right. So there's our 3rd row. And so I'm going to go over to my ironing table and I'm going to press these seams open on the back so that they're nice and flat. Okay, and I would recommend using a very good steam iron to do this because these are a little bulkier, so you want to make sure that you have a good steam iron that's going to make things lay flat for you. So I'm going to go do that now, and then I will be back in a moment and we'll put our rows together. Okay, so I've got my rows all pressed out and I've got my seams laying nice and flat, so that'll help us when we go to stitch in the ditch to keep everything nice and flat. So we're going to put this row on the top. So this row is going to sew onto the top. So make sure you got you're a good egg right side up, because knowing me, I would put it upside down. So we're going to go ahead and put this one on the top here and stitch this one on. I like to put a pin on either side of my seam allowances to hold everything flat so it doesn't flip over on me, since these are a little stiff. And let's get this one on here. This one. Okay, let's see if our ends, I might put a little pin at the end here. I think the other end's pretty good. And then we'll do the last row. Okay. Gigi's going to be in charge of my last row. She's over here helping me today. She likes to sit on her little ironing pad over here. So, all right. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're still using a 1/4 inch seam with Q02 for the piecing stitch. And I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam. And I am going to leave those pins in, and if you're very careful, these are a very special pin, and I think I link them in, I'll link them in the video for you. These are magic pins. They're called extra fine magic pins. They're patchwork pins. They're very, very, very soft. And I've never found a pin that you should ever sew over until I found these. And if you're very careful and just slowly go over them, for certain things I will leave them in just so that I can keep everything good and flat. All right, so then we're going to sew through this one. And there is our first and second row together, and then we'll do the third row. The third row is the one with the little bunny in it. A little chocolate bunny. Looks like a chocolate bunny. Okay, so here's our first and second row. That looks so nice. I like the green. I ended up adding just kind of a little bit more of a minty green to mine because that's the colors I had. I like that. So, okay, so then we're going to put this one down here at the bottom. So let's make sure we get it right side up. And we're going to pin this one on to the bottom here. Same thing. Put my pins in. I like to put them on both sides of the seam allowance just to hold everything flat for me. They always flip over if I don't pin them. And then you've got a bulky spot when you go to do your stitching in the ditch. So, all right. And then there's a little extra bulk on these anyway, because remember we had that little lining piece in there. So there's a little bit of extra bulk on these anyway. Okay, so then we're going to do the same thing with this one. Line it all up. Do our 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Sorry if you saw hair flying. Gigi had an itch evidently, and she flew hair all over the the sewing machine. I think she's going to go away now. So I think she's going to go sleep on her tuffet. I have a tuffet in front of the window, underneath the window, right in front of my sewing machine cabinet. And she likes to lay over there, so I think that's where she's heading. All right. So slowly over the pins, and you can pull them if you want to. I just am very careful when I go over them. All right, I'm going to tie off here and cut, and then I'm going to do the same thing with these. So I'm going to take all my pins out. Oops, here, landed one on the floor. Okay, so then I'm going to take this back over to my ironing pad, and I'm going to open the seams so that they're nice and flat on the back on my rows, and that's going to be so cute. And then I'll come over and I'll show you how I'm going to put the backing on. So I'll be right back after I do my pressing. Okay, so we got our little mini quilt all stitched together here. Oh my gosh, isn't that cute? I really like it. All right, so now we're going to do, we're going to put the backing on. So I won't do all of this on the camera, but I wanted to show you how I do it. And then I'll go over to my cutting table. So we're going to be doing a little pin basting here. In a second, let me get my pins out. Got to get my basting pin. So these are like a large safety pin for basting. And then we've already got the batting in here, so we don't need to add any more batting. You can if you want to, but I usually don't because it makes them kind of stiff. So I'm going to lay my backing fabric, that 14 by 14 inch backing fabric, face down, so that this is the shape flex side, and this is the nice pretty side. Okay, so I'm going to lay this down like this, and then I'm going to center my little mini quilt right on top of it. And then they give you a little bit of room all the way around. Try to get it, as straight as you can. And then what I'm going to do is take my basting pins, and I don't want to do this all on my machine, but I'll show you a few so you can see. And I'm just going to take my basting pins, and I'm going to kind of start in the middle here and put in some basting pins. And try to keep them away from the, like the areas where you're going to have to stitch in the ditch, because we're going to stitch down these seam lines. So just kind of try to keep them out of the way, Okay, and then I'm going to go out here, and then I'm going to go put a couple in my sashings, and then I'm going to go up here and put a couple in each one of my blocks to prepare it to do the stitching in the ditch. So I'm going to go do that on my table so I can lay it all nice and flat. And then I'll be back and we'll work with the stitch in the ditch. Okay, so I'm all pin basted, and I like to pin baste so that I'm not going to have things scooting around on me. You can see the pins through the back. This is the pretty side of the fabric, and I've got the shape flex on the inside just to give me some body. Now I like to stitch in the ditch usually with a monofilament. So this is the Metler Transfill, and I really like to, I'm going to go put my needle back in the center here, and I'm going to just leave my J-foot on. If you want to use a walking foot, you can. I normally don't, as I find that the machine feeds just fine without a walking foot. So if you're having problems, put on a walking foot. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to stitch down the center of this little seam allowance here. And my J-foot has a little notch on the center that really helps me to do this. So I usually just use my J-foot when I'm doing this. And if you have another foot that works for you, by all means, use that. I'm going to go ahead and start with my needle down. I'm going to tie a knot. I also have the monofilament in the bobbin. And I'm just, oh, you know what? I'm going to lengthen my stitch a little bit from 2.5 to 3. Just make it a little longer because this is a little bulky. Just make that stitch just a little longer so it goes through easier. And I'm just stitching right down the seam allowance. And that longer stitch helps quite a bit. So 3.0 is what I have it set at. Okay, I'll have to move my pin here a little bit. I try to put the pin somewhere where I don't have to move them when I'm stitching. And you notice that I kind of started in the center here. Oops, here. So we're going to start with these long center lines first. Okay, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to tie off. Okay, and let's move in one. Maybe. Catch on all these pins. Here we go. This one I may have to move over a little bit. And we'll do this one. So we're just going to sew in all of these little ditches. Okay, tie off. And I'm just going to stitch right down through the seam allowance. And the thing I like about putting the shape flex on the back then of this, it really helps keep that backing fabric from, because when I didn't put anything on it, the backing fabric always kind of puckered up a little bit because of the bulk. You know, we're going through quite a few layers here. And I'll turn it over and show you when we get done with this one, because it really keeps it nice and flat. I prefer to quilt through my items, but when I do little bitty things like this, the block by block method is very quick, so I usually don't. But if I do a quilt, I like to do a different type of quilting method so I can quilt through the backing. Okay, so let me show you what the back looks like. But see how it keeps it from puckering, and see how nice and flat it looks on the back. So that really helps that shape flex, just keeps it a little bit more stable. All right, so we got the first two done. Let's move down here and do this one. To pull my pin this way. Tie off again. And then we'll do all these little short ones. Oops, nope, I don't think I unthreaded. I think it's okay. It's a little hard to see with the monofilament if you're unthreaded or not. I can usually tell the way it sounds, so I think it's okay. That clear thread is also sometimes does not thread terribly well in the needle threaders, just so you're aware. This one actually did thread for me today. I usually have to hand thread it. It doesn't, it's kind of stiff, and so it won't pull it back. So, all right, so let's get down to the end here. Tie off. Okay, and we'll do our other long strip, and then we'll do the small ones for the little blocks. Okay. Get down on this one. I like to drop my needle first so then I can tie off. I'm going to take one more stitch in and tie off again. There we go. Okay. And we'll go across. But that little notch in my J-foot really makes it easier for me to know exactly where my ditch is, because I can just put that right on top of it. And there's some, may have to take that pin out. I'm not sure if it'll go past it. Let's see. I think it will. Yep, just barely. But I do like monofilament for stitching in the ditch, because then if you have lots of different colors, you don't see, take the chance of seeing like a white thread or something. If it's all the same color, you can just use that color, but I usually use monofilament. Okay, so we'll tack off, we'll tie off on this end. Okay, and I'll turn it over so you can see what the back looks like, and then we'll go ahead and do our little short ones here. But look, that looks real nice. Except I think maybe I ran out of bobbin thread. Whoops, I did. Well, I guess I'll stop the video for a second and wind bobbin thread. My bobbin sensor must be dirty again, so it didn't tell me. So see, I'm out of bobbin thread. So I'm going to have to go back and do that little strip again. So I'll stop the video for a minute, and I will go back and do my that strip that we just did, and I will wind a bobbin. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I just got done winding my bobbin, and I thought I'd probably better come on and remind you about monofilament and bobbin winding. I turned my bobbin winder way down. You want to turn it down. Most of the bobbin winders give you the option, some of them with this button on with the, the button up here. On this machine, it has two motors, and so mine comes up when I flip this in, it comes up down here. The speed is right here. So you can see I have it turned almost all the way down as slow as it will go. And then I do not wind a very full bobbin. So let me show you my bobbin. I've only got maybe 1/8 of a bobbin. So I just do maybe 1/4 or 1/8 of a bobbin at a time, because if you wind too much of this monofilament, it kind of stretches as it winds. It'll kind of sply your bobbin. So just be careful when you're winding monofilament. And let's see, I wonder if my machine will thread again. It threaded the first time. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Let's see what it does here. I usually have to struggle and thread my monofilament, so go grab my glasses and try to get it threaded. See if it threads this time. Oh my gosh, it did 2 times in a row. That's pretty awesome. Doesn't do that very often with monofilament. It's just kind of stiff. So this is real thin monofilament, and I really like it. Okay, so now we need to redo that row. I think I'm just going to do the whole thing, because it looks like I was pretty much out for the whole thing. So we'll just start up here at the top again. Do this row again. All right, and then we'll do our little short ones. Still on my length of 3 to make that stitch just a little longer for this bulk. It's always hard for me. I need to take my machine apart on the underneath and clean it again. I get a lot of fuzz. I do a lot of batting and cotton fabrics, and I get lots of fuzz around the bobbin sensor. So if your bobbin sensor is not working, it's usually just because there's a lot of fuzz down there, and there's like 2 little lights. Our technician told me one time what it is. It's like 2 little lights, and once they meet, then they stop the machine. Well, if there's fuzz in between there, they won't stop. So mine probably needs to be cleaned again. It's about time for my machine to go to see Ron anyway. So, all right. So now we're going to do our little short blocks here. So let's start on this one. I'm going to line it right up on that little junction. Tie off. See if I can get that pin down anymore. And we'll just go right up that one. Tie off at the end here. This is going to be so cute. Can't wait to get this done. Okay. Get this one done. Oops, I got a little tail I need to cut off. You can't see them. You can sure feel them though. They're kind of stiff, so they poke you. All right, let's get this one in here. Tie off again, and I think maybe I'm going to have to take this pin out, because I don't think it's going to let me go past it. There we go. All right, so let's go with this one. I think I'm going to put my binding on with monofilament too this time because I don't really have a thread that really matches this very well. It's kind of a pinky color, kind of a, I just don't have a good thread for that. So we'll probably use monofilament for that too. All right, so there are the two top blocks. Let me get the little tail here. And then let's turn it over and do these. And then I'll show you what it looks like on the back. This is going to look so nice. Okay, let's get there. Tie off. And I may have to take this, well, maybe not. I might be able to slide it over. Oops. Oh, made my machine mad. Hit the wrong button. All right. Go down here and tie off. Looks good. And then we'll get the last one. Make sure my pins are all out of the way here. All right. Yeah, making that stitch just a little bit longer sure helps. It makes it travel a lot better. So, all right, so then we're going to tie off down here. And I'll turn it over so you can see what it looks like on the back. I think it should look nice. Oh my gosh, look at there. So we got all of our little blocks all stitched in. So now we need to stitch around the outside as well. So I'm going to still stay with my monofilament. I'm going to leave my needle in the center. And there's two notches on this foot. So there's a middle notch and then the notch over a little bit to the right. And I'm going to put the fabric right on that right hand notch. And that gives me about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And that's just a nice guide with this foot to help you know where, and because I don't want it to be in the 1/4 inch seam allowance, I want it to be outside of that so that when we go to put our binding on, this won't show. But I want this to be held together with the backing. So we're just going to drive around the outside edge here at about 1/8 of an inch. Get my pin out of the way. Hopefully I can get past that one. And I left it at the 3.0 since we're going through quite a bit of layers. So, okay, so we're going to go down here to the end and flip around. And if you notice that my foot's going up and down, I have my pivot feature on. So if a lot of machines have this. So here's the pivot. It looks like the foot with the little needle. And I really like that because when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I don't have to touch quite so many buttons when I get to like where I want to turn and that type of thing. All right, so we're going to do the same thing down this side. Trying to be careful of my pins. You definitely don't want to hit these safety pins, let me tell you. I only did it one time, but boy, was it a mess. My machine the timing was off because they are hard pins. So be very careful of basting pins. Okay, so I'm going to flip this around. Get all the way around the outside edge here. Get this one out of my way. This is going to be so cute. I can't wait to see it done. The binding always really makes it, you know. I like putting the binding on because it's amazing how much different it looks once you put the binding on. Same thing with quilts. You know, just big quilts too. They look so different and your eye stops. So it kind of, you know, your binding is kind of what stops your eye and draws you back to the center. So I've always loved it when I get the binding on. Okay, so I'll go up this side. I think this is the last side. Then I'll go take all the pins out. Whoops, second here. Okay. Go take out all the pins, and then we're going to trim the backing right up to the edges of your fabric, okay, so of your front. So I'm just going to go, I'll do this and show you what it looks like, and then I will go do that at my cutting table and come back, and then we're ready for binding already. My goodness. Okay, so I'm just going to tie off here. Got all the way around, all tied down, but then I just need to trim my backing down. But isn't that cute? Look, got all of that done on the back. Looks nice and flat, and we're going to also put our little sleeve on when we get ready to do the next section. We'll put our sleeve on also, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go take all of these pins out. I'm going to go ahead and trim right up to the edge of my blocks because the seam allowance is included in there. So I just want my backing to be the same size. And then I'll come back and we'll put on our binding and attach the sleeve. Okay, so now we're ready to put the binding on and get our little sleeve on. So here's the little sleeve. I did go ahead and hem the ends like that, and then I folded it in half the short way. So this is the 11. This is the shorter way. This is the shorter way, and then this is the it's 11, about 12 inches long this way, or maybe only 11 now since I put the hem in it. Okay, so then since I took out some of the underneath side, see how the hems then just kind of lay inside of each other? Keeps it from being quite so bulky, but then it gives you more body with a double sleeve. Okay, so this is going to be the underneath side, and you can also see that I've ironed on my Heat and Bond Ultra. So I just kind of put it inside the hems. I found that it didn't want to stick too well with the hems because I wasn't getting it wasn't getting hot enough through that layer. So I just put the Heat and Bond in the middle, and then I'm just going to take a stitch with white thread on each corner, just out here on the corners of my sleeve once I'm done and got it on the back. So this is going to be the underneath part, and I've measured the center of my sleeve with a pin. And I also found the center of the top of my little on my little wall hanging here, so my little mini quilt. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh boy, I've got all kinds of lint all over. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put the skinnier side in with the Heat and Bond down against the back, and we'll iron that down at the end when everything's all sewn together. But we want to put the raw edge up here, which will be inside the binding, and then that'll all be sewn into the binding. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a pin in here to hold this all in. And up here, put a pin here, I think, too. That's where that other piece is. And then I'm just going to pin the flap down at the bottom just a little bit so that it won't flop up and get in my binding here. Put this on the back. Like that. Okay, then I'm just going to stick a pin down here just to keep this from flopping up on me. That way it won't flip up. You may need a couple of pins. Maybe I'll put one on each end to keep it from flipping up. I don't like to iron down the Heat and Bond until after it's sewn in case something slides a little bit while I'm doing the binding. So we'll just pin the bottom down so it won't flop up on us. Okay, so I am going to do machine binding. So my binding is going to go on the back of the mini quilt. Oops, I've got another little tail here. We'll get that cut off. There we go. So I'm going to turn it over upside down here, and we're going to put the binding on the back. If you like to hand stitch, you would put your binding on the front. Okay, so depending on what you're doing, I've switched back to my white Pima cotton thread just to put the binding on, and then I'm going to go back to sew it down with the monofilament. Okay, so here's my binding. I've got it all ready to go, and I will link the bind aid if you have trouble with binding. This is how I learned to do binding, is with this little document called Bind Aid. It was awesome. Very simple. So we're just going to start. I'm going to kind of put my fabric up kind of towards the center here. This is the bottom. I'm going to go back to Q02 because I need my 1/4 inch seam again. And I have my Pima cotton thread back in the needle and the binding. So I'm going to go back to Q02. Just a second here. I have my embroidery unit on, so it's stuck on my little hoop thing. There we go. All right, so now we're going to do our 1/4 inch seam all the way around, and I'll show you how to do this. It's very easy. We're going to flip our corners, but I am sewing this on the back since this is going to be sewed down with the sewing machine. So we're going to go up to the corner, stop about 1/4 inch from the corner. I've gotten so that I don't really need to measure anymore. I can just kind of eyeball it. Okay, so I'm going to flip it around, and then I'm going to take my binding, and of course the raw edges are on the outside edge. I'm going to flip it up at a 45-degree angle to the corner here, and then I'm going to flip it down, straight down, and line up the raw edges again. I'm going to see where it's at. There we go. Like that. I'm going to start on the edge, tie it off so that there's a knot in the corner, and then we're going to go up this side. And I know some of you have done a lot of binding, and I just decided for these I would just go ahead and do a binding video and just do the whole thing at the end, because I have to do it anyway, and I might as well just leave the camera on. That way you have a binding video right with the rest of it, and you don't have to go hunt up a different binding video if you need help with your binding. All right, so we're going to go up to this corner, stop about 1/4 inch from the end. Okay, that looks about right. I'm going to tie off. And then I'm going to flip my binding up again to a 45-degree angle to this corner. Get it laid nice and flat. And then I'm going to bring it straight down and line up all my raw edges again. Okay, and I might need to take those pins out when we get there. We'll see how we go here. I'm going to tie this off. Okay, second here. Make sure all my edges are even with my little, make sure my little sleeve is even here. There we go. All right. Okay, so then we're going to sew this. I think I'll just take these out as I go. Get everything nice and straight. We're going through quite a few layers when we get up here, of course. Take this pin out, make sure I'm still nice and straight on the sides here. Okay, get these nice and straight. Just a little high on this corner here. There we go. Okay. And I've noticed that it doesn't matter what I do. I always end up with a seam in the corner. This was a different length. It's not like 3 widths of a back quarter. This one was just 2 widths of I had a piece of fabric that was, I don't know, 30 some inches, 35 inches long or something. And of course I still ended up with a seam in the corner. You know, it's Murphy's Law. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go up to the corner here, do our 45-degree angle, come straight down. That'll be a corner that'll be a little hard to get when we go to flip it over, but it'll be okay. I don't think I've done any of these yet that I haven't had one of my seams in the corner. It's kind of my thing, I think. All right, so let's get this side going. Again, I'm using Q02 on my machine. I'm using my 1/4 inch piecing stitch. So all the binding starts the same. Just depends on if you put it on the front or on the back. So I'm going to do machine stitch down, so mine's on the back, and if you like to hand stitch yours down, you put it on the front. So that stuff's all the same. Okay, get this down to about 1/4 inch from the corner here. Okay. die off. And we'll flip around the corner. So I'm going to have to stop not too far around the corner here. So cut. All right, let's see. We're going to have to stop pretty close to the edge of the corner here. So we'll go around the corner a little ways. All right, so I'm going to bring my corner up. I got a little overzealous. So I think I'm going to trim this just a little bit and pull it back because I'm just a little close on that one because my corner's not lining up nice for me. There we go. Okay, and then bring it straight down. It's okay if I clip in the corner. It'll be fine because we're going to stitch over it again. So, and then I'm just going to go around the corner just a little ways. Tie it off. Don't go around too far. So just leave a little spot in the middle for us to work with here. That looks pretty good. So just going to go ahead and tie this off. And now I'll show you how to do, this is always the hard part for a lot of people, this little flip thing at the end. All right. And this is all in bind aid too. So this is how I learned to do it. So what made it easier for me is I lay this on my table and I lay, this is the piece we ended with, and I'm going to lay this down and I'm just going to kind of fold it down like this. Okay. This piece here is the one we started with, and I'm going to lay it on top. And I'm going for my, so since this was 2 1/4 inch binding, I am going to measure 2 1/4 inches and put a pin in. If you have 2 1/2 inch binding, you would measure 2 1/2 inches from the end of the front piece here back. And I'm going to put the pin in the underneath side. So mine's 2 1/4 since that's the size of binding I had, and I'm just going to put that in there, and then we'll remeasure to make sure I got it in the right spot. So lay this down. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to wiggle the camera so much. And I'm going to measure again. That looks pretty good. Okay, so there's my 2 1/4 inches. So then this one here we're going to leave alone, and this one we're going to cut off. So I'm going to fold it right where that pin is. Like that. And we're just going to trim that one off. So then we have a 2 1/4 inch overlap for my binding, and if you're doing 2 1/2 inch, it would be a 2 1/2 inch overlap. Okay, so now we got our two pieces. So this piece over here, we're going to bring it down at a 45-degree angle, kind of like we did when we went over the corners. Okay, and then this piece, we're going to open it up, put the wrong side down, and just lay it right here like that. Okay. So this is the wrong side of the fabric laying against the back of the little quilt. Okay. Then this piece over here, get my pins ready. This piece over here, the easiest thing to do, we've got this corner turned down at our 45-degree angle. I'm going to open this up so I can see the wrong side, and I'm going to continue in the same direction and just bring it up, and it's going to look really weird. Bring it up to the corner of this one, and we're just going to put the two corners together, and we're going to pin those corners. I'm going to put 3 pins in here, one in the corner and one on either side of the corner. And these are a little hard because they're kind of stiff. You know, the little quilt's kind of stiff and small. So I'm going to put 3 in here to hold it as flat as possible. Do this one. And then sometimes I just have to kind of fold my little quilt. Okay. And put a pin in here. Okay. So then if you're worried that you don't have it right, just let it go, and you can tell, even though there's a pin in there, and that's fine. You can kind of tell that everything's going to lay flat, okay, once it twists back. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my corners. I always have to use a marking pen to do this. And you can mark the line all the way across if you want. It's not that long, so I can usually eyeball it. But I like to mark where my corners are of my edges here, like right here. So I'm going to mark on top here with my marking pen. And then down here you can see it, but I'm just going to mark it anyway to give me something to guide by. So I'm just going to mark it. And if you want to, you can mark all the way across there. I usually just mark the ends. Okay. Now I'm going to move my needle to the center needle position, which on my Q tab is Q01. So I'm just going to move my needle back into the center here. And I'm going to kind of fold my little quilt because I want my binding to lay flat. And this is a little step, so you kind of have to fold your little quilt up a little bit so that it lays flat. So I'm going to get these flattened out. Make sure nothing's caught underneath. This is where it's a little hard. You have to kind of get everything laid flat. There we go. All right, so there's my corner over there. And I'm a little off on this one. This pin let go. So let me see if I can get this one lined back up again. Sometimes my pins will let go. Makes it hard with these little stiff ones. Oops. Boy, this one's really being cantankerous. All right, let's get this one in here. Let's get these two lined up. There we go. Get the pin in there. Now stay in there. There we go. Okay. And if you kind of bend your quilt, it helps to make this lay flat. All right, so let's get our corner right there. Get my foot down on it while it's flat and get my needle dropped down. Okay, so we get that. And then we need to make sure this is good and flat underneath. Make sure everything's flat. You're not like sewing through multiple layers. And I'm just going to sew across to the other. Oops, here. Guess what? I just broke a needle and I hit a pin. So you got to see me do that. I don't do that very often. And of course it was the pin that didn't want to stay in, but I think it's okay now. So let me turn off the camera for a minute while I change my needle. Since I broke a needle. I'll do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so let's try this again. I got my needle changed. So, you know, you got to see that I have that happen too, you know. So we're going across here. Got it nice and flat this time. And it's behaving itself pretty well. Okay, so that is stitched. I don't know why that was being so mean to me, but you know, sometimes it happens. All right, so let's see how we did here. Let's see if I did okay. So we'll take these little pins out. We'll let it flip over to see how it looks, and then we can trim the fabric. I never trim until I just flip it over to make sure I did okay. So then it lays flat. We'll take that big bulky piece out of there. So I always like to wait to trim until after I've checked just to make sure. Every now and then I get one flipped over the wrong direction. So, all right. So you can see things happen to me too. Yesterday, I actually, while I was doing the videos for the blocks, I broke like 3 needles, which is really weird. And I don't know what I was doing, but anyway, I didn't put them in the video because it broke like when I was just finishing something or, you know. So, all right. So now we're going to get these laid in here, and it's a little bit loose, so we're going to work that fullness in just a little bit. I like to pin this. So mine's just a little bit full, but it's okay, I think. We'll just work it in as we pin it. Must have been a little off on one of my corners. That one just did not, the pin did not want to stay in there. So I think that's the one. All right, so we'll get these all pinned across here. But it will be fine. Put a couple extra pins in, and I'm going to pull the pins as I'm going on these because these are kind of thick. So let's just get some of the fullness worked in a little bit. All right, so I'm going to go back to Q02 for my 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to start up kind of where we left off and stitch this down. And then we will be ready to stitch the binding down. Okay. And kind of take these pins out as I go because this one's a little thicker. I've already broken one needle in front of you. I don't need to do another one, right? It happens. All right. Let's Do one at a little section at a time, especially if you have a little fullness. That's what I do, is I just kind of do a little bit at a time and just kind of work it in as I'm going. There, looks pretty good. But sometimes I'll get that fullness if I don't quite get the, like my corners quite lined up, and my corners were a little bit off because my pins kept coming out this time for some reason. This is pretty stiff though. Okay, so there is, we got a little bit of fullness there and a little bit here, but I think it'll be fine. Okay, so there is our binding. We got the flip in there. Got a couple bent pins here. I throw away a lot of pins because if I sew over them, they get bent. So I throw a lot of these pins away. All right. All right. So then what I'm going to do next is, before I do sew it down, I'm going to go over to my ironing table and I'm going to iron this binding out from the back at a very crisp seam. So I want to have a very crisp seam along the back like this. And I'm going to take my iron and go all the way around. Make sure you get into your corners and make them nice and crisp also. And then we will turn it to the front and sew the binding down on from the front. So I'll be right back after I do my pressing. I'm going to do that very crisp seam all the way around the outside. Okay, so I pressed this out to a very nice crisp seam on the back. Okay, and then we have to do the corners. So I did 3 of the corners already, so I'll just do 1 for you. We've done these quite a few times, so you've seen me do this. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by taking my binding. This is the corner here. Oop, I got a bunch of strings, so we'll get those out of there. And I'm going to flip this back, and then I'm going to take my binding over and just clip it right up to that line where our stitching was, you know, the stitching line that we stitched the binding with. And it's white, and that's why I made it white, because it's a little hard to see the monofilament when you're doing this, so I usually make mine white. Okay, so then I'm just going to clip on either side of my corner, and then we're going to get a pin here. I'll get my pin and lay it here. And we're going to push the binding right up into the corner with my thumb on the right-hand side and make that corner. And then I'm going to pull it down, and I'm going to bring this side down to the stitching line on the other side, and we're going to have this beautiful 45-degree corner here. I'm going to stick a pin in there, and we'll leave the pins in because we need that to hold that beautiful corner for us on our corners. So when we get around there, it's going to be nice and beautiful. Okay, so there's our corners. I did all of them, and so I have like 8 clover clips and a pin in each corner. Okay, so that's how we're going to do that. So I'm going to turn the video off for just a moment. I need to get my monofilament thread back in, and I'm going to also have to get my glasses so I can see what I'm doing here when I go with the monofilament. And then we're going to start the zigzagging process to zigzag the binding down on the front. Okay, so I've got my machine set to zigzag, and I went back to my 1 tab, which is my standard straight stitch zigzag tab, and I'm on 1-10, and I have my settings set up for binding there. So I like to use the width of 2.0 and the length of 1.4. So it's pretty narrow, and then it's not too far apart, but not real close. So I'm using the width of 2 and the length of 1.4. I'm sorry, 1.4 is the length. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring our binding around to the white line that we used to sew it on with, just right up to it. I'm going to lay my foot, and this J foot again, I'm going to use that little notch in the center like we used before, right here. And I'm going to lay that notch right on the edge of my binding. Okay, give me just a second. This is just the wrong width because I always leave my embroidery unit on, so it likes to catch on things. Okay, there we go. So I've got that notch right on the edge, and I'm going to drop my needle. I'm going to tie off, and the right part of the zigzag is going to be on the binding, and the left side is going to be off the binding. So I just tied off. I'm just going to hold my binding, and I'm going to zigzag. And it's better not to start in a corner. You notice I kind of started in the middle of a side. It's much easier to start away from a corner. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this up here, right up to the line. The fold is going to be right on the line. And the right hand zig is on the binding and the left hand zag is off the binding. And I'm going to pull I'm going to put my fingernail kind of in this corner and pull this back so I can keep this nice and straight coming into this corner. I've got my monofilament in here. The trick with doing zigzagging like this on the front is to try to keep your thread very matchy-matchy. So I'm going into the corner and I'm going to leave the pin in there, okay? Then I'm going to slowly go around here and see how I did. So I overshot it by just a little bit. So if you do that, that's fine. I'm going to put my foot down. And I'm going to, well, actually I'm going to put my foot back up again, and I'm going to raise my needle, and we're just going to kind of slide over, put the foot back down, and make sure that we're lined up with the notch on the edge of the binding, and it looks pretty good. I'm take that little clip out, and I'm going to get my binding all organized on that line again, and then come out of the corner. So just take your time. Your corners will get better as you practice. My corners are not perfect, but I am getting way better at it. I've had a lot of practice. So the trick with this is just to do it and practice, because you will get way better at it as you do it. Okay, and the other trick is to make sure that you've got a very crisp seam on the back. Okay, so I'm just zigzagging out, bringing my binding around as I'm going here, holding it down. And this is that little spot that was just a little bit full, so we'll have to give it a little bit of help here. I'm going to hold it a little bit so that it stays kind of flat for me. It usually doesn't cause too much trouble if you've got a little bit of fullness, but sometimes I have to kind of hold it down with my fingers while I'm going. Second here, I'm having a little trouble. This is just the wrong size for the embroidery unit to be on, but I so rarely take it off because I sew and embroider so often in the same class. So I don't always take my embroidery unit off. Okay, so I'm just holding this down to hold that fullness out just a little bit. Okay. It's looking way better now. Get this pulled back. I'm holding it right on the line. And if you kind of spread your fingers out, it really helps. Okay. Second, I'm caught on my embroidery unit again. Okay, so I'm going to pull my finger back into that corner to hold that binding nice and flat. And I'm just going to zigzag into the corner. The other thing that happens is I get stuck on my cabinet in the back. It just did that. All right. So then we're going to zigzag into the corner. Okay. And then I'm going to turn the corner. That looks pretty good. I thought I was going to have some fullness, but I think it looks pretty good. Okay. And I did pretty well this time. I've got my notch right on the edge of my binding, so I don't even have to adjust this time. So I did pretty well this time. I'm getting better at it. And you just have to practice. Just practice, practice, practice. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And your stitches get, more true, and you don't have, bad corners, and it's amazing how much better you get as you do this. All right. So I'm going to continue the same way all the way around to the other side of the quilt. And I will show you how I'm going to finish it, but I don't think you need to watch me go through all of these, but I'll go ahead and turn the camera off for a minute while I zigzag around. And just remember, take your time going into the corners, keep everything lined up, and you'll come out with beautiful bindings. So I'll be back in a moment when I get my binding stitched down. Okay, so I'm getting down to the last corner here, and then there's just a little bit around, so thought maybe you'd like to see me do another corner. So again, I'm putting my fingernail kind of right in the corner there where the pin is, and keeping everything nice and straight, and right up against my stitching line, and I'm going to go right into the corner. Okay, whoops, I think I need to take one more stitch. There we go. I'm going to go around the corner, and let's see how, ooh, I even got it lined up. Look at there. Okay, and we're going to get everything lined up here and come out of the corner. Okay, and then I put a pin where I started right here, because what happens is it's very hard to see, where this monofilament is. And you don't want to sew over that zigzag too far, because if you do, it really shows where the zigzag is, especially if you're using, like cotton thread. So I like to put a pin and just I hardly want to take one stitch over the zigzag where I started. So we're just about there. I got the pin right under my finger here. Just a second. All right. There we go. So right down to the pin. So I'm just going to go right down to the pin and stop, because I don't like to sew over the zigzag, because you really notice it if you do. So kind of want to join them. All right. And then I'm going to tie off and cut. And we did it. Got all the way around the outside. I'm going to take these pokey pins out before I stab myself with them. And then look at there. And then if you can see the zigzags, you probably can't see them very well, but they're right on the back of the binding right here, right along. And even my corners all look pretty good on this one. So I'm very pleased with this. Okay, so there's our little mini quilt. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this over to my ironing table, and I'm going to pull that paper off my heat and bond, and I'm going to fuse it down, and I'm going to take a little piece of white thread and just put a little tie in each corner there, because the heat and bond doesn't like to hold it down too well. So I'm just going to do a little hand stitch there, and I'll be back and I'll put it in the frame so you can see what it looks like all done. But isn't that adorable? I'm just really liking that one. It turned out so cute. So I'll be right back with the little quilt up in the frame so you can see it. Okay, so I got my little stitches taken in the corners here, and I almost forgot, this one has the little flowers on it. We have to put our little flowers on that we made, our little freestanding lace flowers. Now you'll probably need to trim these a little bit. Mine had a bunch of little threads sticking out, so I just trimmed them. When I got them dry, I just trimmed them a little bit. I still got a thread in this one. All right, so we're going to get all of our little flowers out here. We got to put our flowers on. I almost forgot about them. Okay, let's see. So I think there's about 8 or 9 flowers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so I'm just going to look at the picture on page 24 and kind of lay them out sort of like that. So it looks like there's one kind of right here. So let's just lay them out. And then maybe kind of a medium-sized pink one about here on the U, and then there's kind of a peachy one over the R, like there. And then let's see, I think there's a smaller pink one over here by the G, and another peachy one down here. So they just kind of have them laying randomly. And then there's a bigger pink one over here by the E, like that. And then we have a yellow one. Oops, I think I knocked one off. One of these needs to go over here. The little yellow one over here by the Y. There we go. And then this one is a yellow one, goes kind of over here between the E and the G. And then this little pink one kind of down there. Okay. So they just kind of had them randomly spread out over the top there. And so we're just going to go ahead and use a little hot glue. So here I got to get my glue gun going here. It's being drippy for some reason. And we'll just put these on. So I'm just going to put a little bit on the back and we'll just kind of put them down where we had them. So if you kind of lay them out where you want them, then you can kind of stitch them. You can just kind of glue them down. So let's see here. Oops. Here's a pink one. That one kind of was up over here. Like that. So they were just kind of randomly spaced. Let's see, let's put this one over here. I almost forgot these. These are so cute. They turned out really good. I like that I put the bobbin thread or the matching embroidery thread in the bobbin because they seem like they're just a little bit stiffer. I don't know. They didn't say to do that, but made them a little bit stiffer, I think. All right, so we'll get that one in there. Okay, we haven't got this one done, so we'll do this one. And let's see, kind of over in here. I'm just looking at the picture on page 24 to kind of give me an idea where to put them. So they're just kind of random. And then let's see, I think we're going to need to go over here yet. Get this one kind of over here above the R. Like that. And then another pink one. Let's see, this one's kind of over here. Like that. And then the little yellow one down here. So I think that's the last one. Put that one on here. And it was kind of over here by the Y. Like that. There. Got our cute little flowers. I think they're all done. Did I get them all? I think so. There we go. Just use a little hot glue on those. There. So there's the little flower. Oh my gosh, those are so cute. I love the little flowers. I still got a little string over here. I'll have to trim that. Looks like I've got a couple of jump stitches in my words too. So, but there's our little flowers. Aren't those darling? So give me just a second. I'm going to put this up in the frame so you can see it hanging in the frame, and then we'll talk a little bit about next month's. Okay, so I've put our little mini quilt up into the frame. Isn't that adorable? I just love the flowers. It turned out so cute. And that is then the April Kimberbell Mini Quilt. I'm so excited to have gotten to do that one. And these were really fun, the little applique. That was just a totally different way of doing reverse applique. I really liked that. So thank you so much for joining me. Next month, so around the 1st of April, we'll do the May Mini Quilt. And oh my gosh, I was going to show you a picture of it. It's so cute. So here's the May one. It has little flowers. Looks like they might be fringe and butterflies on it. Looks like it's a real bright, pretty colored one. So I'm real anxious for this one. So this is May. We'll do that around the 1st of April sometime. I'll get the videos done for that. But in the meantime, I'm so anxious to see all of your creations with your April Mini Quilt. And thank you so much for joining me. And if you haven't subscribed to Sew Along with Jan, please do. It keeps you notified when I have new videos and everything, and it is free. You don't have to pay anything to subscribe. And then also, if you would like the video, give me a thumbs up at the end. So I appreciate that. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you for the May Mini Quilt by Kimberbell, probably around the 1st of April. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.